Welcome to Knife Thoughts. This video is going to be my review of this knife, and as you can see, this is the Wheat State Cutlery Peacekeeper. And so this is the first model from Wheat State Cutlery, which is kind of a sister brand to Finch knives. So if you're familiar with Finch knives, they are a brand of knives that have a lot of really cool patterns, and one of the things that first drew me to Finch knives is that they take inspiration from kind of traditional knives, traditional, themes. For example, the very first Finch knife, the Runtley, took inspiration from vintage fishing lures. And I just thought that was really cool. And I did a pass around and really have been interested in them since then. So I was really excited to see them coming out with this line of slip joint knives. So that's what Wheat State Cutlery is more traditional, more two-hand opening, non-locking knives as compared to the line of Finch knives, which are modern one-hand opening, locking, flipper style knives, things like that. And if you follow my channel, you know that I really like, almost kind of lean towards generally traditional knives, slip joint knives. So I was excited to see these, and particularly I saw that this was a Barlow inspired pattern. Now, I'm glad that they didn't outright call this a Barlow. I think that they either said Barlow inspired or Barlow style pattern. I appreciate that because I am a little bit of a stickler for a Barlow being a true Barlow. So what does that mean? Well, typically a Barlow is a regular jack, which the Peacekeeper has a rounded end that is long or wider than the pivot end, sometimes more of a square end and sometimes more of a rounded end, but usually more of a square end. And I'm just giving you a couple examples. This is a Great Eastern Cutlery number 86, and this is a case Barlow. So you can see the Peacekeeper has definitely a very similar overall kind of outline pattern. Now, when you compare the bolsters on these, you'll see the real kind of identifier as a Barlow. So a Barlow has an elongated bolster, and the typical rule is that a Barlow should have a bolster that is 1/3 the total length of the handle. Now, that's not always 100% the case. So for example, this is a Great Eastern Cutlery number 78 pattern, and it does have an elongated bolster. So I'll give you a comparison to a regular number 78. You can see that the bolster is longer, but it definitely is not 1/3 the handle length. Now, I was somewhat critical of this being called a Barlow, but it doesn't always have to be a full 1/3 of the handle. But the Peacekeeper does not come close enough to be called a Barlow in my, very non-official opinion. So I was glad to see that they called it Barlow inspired rather than calling it a true Barlow. I think a lot of people have come to see this type of pattern, what I would probably call again a regular jack, as a Barlow pattern. There are certainly lots of companies that are making knives, particularly like modern slip joints and even non-slip joints, and calling them Barlows even though they don't have an elongated bolster. So that's probably more talk on that than you cared to hear, but it's something that I care about as a we'll say strong enthusiast of the Barlow pattern. So anyway, it is a nice little pattern. It is a good size for a slip joint, and it has a bunch of things that I really like. So first of all, it has this nice little easy open notch. And I like that because you can get to the nail nick, but it sits super deep in the frame. So you can see that this blade sits very deep in this frame. You're not going to have this kind of creating any uncomfortable points or anything in your pocket, whereas a sheep foot on a typical handle does stick out quite a bit more. So this is a GEC 15 with a sheep foot. This sits much deeper in the frame, but I've never had any trouble getting my thumbnail on there. Now, you can kind of pinch it if you kind of get the points of your index finger and your thumb on the nail nick, and the nail nick is nicely cut out. It's definitely grippy, so you can kind of pinch it, but I think it makes more sense to get your thumbnail on there and open it. And then speaking of the sheep foot, that's another thing that I like. This is a very traditional sheep foot. It's pretty much parallel with the blade spine and the edge. Now it is probably somewhat going towards a lamb foot, meaning that the blade or the edge and the spine come together. I think they do come together very, very slightly, but it's basically a sheep foot, and I think a really good looking sheep foot. So you can see here is the pattern number, and here is Wheat State Cutlery. And one of the really nice things about these is that they're limited. So you can see this is an actual kind of stamping, tang stamp method. So very similar to what GEC uses. So again, this is the 86. So you can see it has the 861121. And so Wheat State Cutlery has their own kind of tang stamp system. So I will cut that into the video here so you can take a look at that. It's going to be an Instagram post that Finch Knives or Wheat State Cutlery put up, and you can see how this tang stamp system works. So I really appreciate that because it is a kind of a nod to a traditionality. So traditionality is probably not a real word, but something that traditional makers, vintage makers, makers from, you know, the previous era of cutlery, the way they did things. So I do appreciate that. Now it's also limited. So I believe there were only 100 made of these, of each of the covers. There were a couple different covers. This is the wood cover, which is the only synthetic cover that they did. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit. Now, I got this and I noticed that there was a gap between the bolster and the cover. And I want to talk about this because I think probably a lot of people who are more fans of modern knives or more familiar with modern knives will be, you know, getting this knife. And so it's actually something that's pretty common on traditional knives, particularly knives with synthetic covers. Now, I don't have a great example right in front of me. Actually, I think I do. So, yeah, so this is a GEC 86 again, and you can see this knife also has a gap between the bolster and the cover. More so on this side here. It's not quite as big as on the Wheat State Cutlery, but it's something that you do see on traditional knives. Very slight gap on this case, and even on GEC knives. So, you know, I think a lot of times people think of GEC knives as perfect, and they are very, very well made, certainly. But on traditional, you know, traditionally built and non-synthetic cover materials, you're just going to have gaps sometimes. Now, you know, I prefer not to have it. I'd love it if this didn't have a gap like the other side. You can see that the other side does not have a gap, but it's something that can happen just with fitting the knives. And the other thing is that they can shrink. So I don't think that this had this when I first got it, but you can see that the liner, you can catch it with your thumbnail. And I think that this kind of area of the wood has shrunk. So that's just something to be aware of. Again, they have other versions that are in synthetic handles or synthetic covers. So if you're worried about that gapping, maybe go for one of those. But other than that, it's really, really nicely made. So again, you can get to that nail nick easily, and the action is nice. So you can see it goes closed there, pulls open at about 5 or 6, 5.5 maybe. Has a half stop. A lot of people really like half stops. I'm kind of ambivalent, to be completely honest, to half stops, but snaps closed. Now, I will say I heard some people that were not happy with the action on these, and action can certainly vary knife to knife. So maybe I got one that was better than a lot of the other ones. I'm not sure, but I don't have any complaints about the action on this knife. I think that it's pretty nice. You've got a stop pin in there, so you don't have to worry about blade wrap. You can let it snap closed. It sits nice and deep in the frame. It's well centered. It's smooth. I don't have any complaints about it. Now, it's not built like a Jack Wolf Knives knife. So you can see that there are chamfers on the back spring and the liners. So that means that it's not fit 100%, you know, edge to edge. So there are little gaps there. It's not like a gap like the knife is coming apart or anything like that. It's just because of those chamfers. So it's differently built than a Jack Wolf Knives knife. And, you know, it's a different feel because of that. It doesn't necessarily have quite as much of the like fine-tuned feel because there are those chamfers, you know, instead of the flush meetings. But again, it's built really nicely. No blade play either, side to side. The pivot screw here does stick up a little bit, so you can kind of feel that there. But, you know, that's not really a practical issue. It carries nicely in the pocket because it is so, you know, low profile. And again, just kind of like a cool thing to add to the market, I think. I'm glad to see Finch Knives doing a slip joint. The other thing is it has nice materials, titanium on the handles, and then I believe it is S90V or M390. Let's see if there's... So this is a good opportunity to show you what comes in the box. And so you've got a really nice little enameled coin. And again, you can see this here. So I believe that this is the pattern and then the number made and then the year. But again, you know, you can see the tang stamp system that I put up. Established 2024. You get... Oh, here it is. So I hadn't actually opened the stickers, but it's actually M390 blade steel. And again, I was correct. This is the pattern number. The 01 is the Peacemaker. The M is for M390. And then 100 is the quantity made, and that's per handle material. And then 24 is the year release. So I like having this also. It's a nice little thing to have. You've got a warranty. I think that's actually a sticker. Yeah, it is a sticker. So there's a warranty sticker. Nice little warranty. Don't disassemble slip joint knives in general. That's my recommendation. And then a, you know, normal logo sticker. And then a really nice, I mean, I assume that it's not real leather. I don't know though. But a really nice leather looking pouch. Nice kind of wool looking stuff on the inside. So it definitely has like a premium feel to the packaging. Particularly, you know, you get this cool coin, the wheat, and the 6-shooter cylinder there, the revolver cylinder. So I think it's a really cool little package. Again, you know, mine has some gaps, but something that you do see even on the most premium traditional slip joint knives. I really appreciate all of the kind of nods and respect for traditional knives that they've put into this, and I'm really looking forward to what Wheat State Knives comes out with next. I think that they, you know, probably have a lot of ideas considering how many different models Finch Knives has, and so I'm looking forward to checking those out. So thank you to Wheat State Cutlery, to everyone at Finch Knives for sending this knife along for me to check out. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and select all. Leave any comments below. Go to my website, knifethoughts.com, where I write articles on knives like this and knife-related topics. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.